Hello and welcome. I'm Bernice Cantuco, a writer-researcher at Rappler, and this is Rappler Talk. Today, we're joined by Movement Against Disinformation conveners Tony Lavinia and Rico Domingo. Tony is the Dean at the Ateneo School of Government, and Rico is the President of the Philippine Bar Association. Welcome, Tony and Rico.
Thank you.
Welcome
Hello.
and good afternoon.
Good
I'm no
afternoon.
longer dean, I'm former dean of the Ateneo School of Government. Denise.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me, and I'm sorry. So we're here to talk about Movement Against Disinformation. MAD is a coalition against disinformation, and it's made up of many different groups, lawyers, members of the academe, NGOs. Could you tell us about MAD, how it came to be, and why it was important for you to form this group?
Well, I can start. This starts from a realization that there's so much disinformation going on in the country, and especially in our politics as we, uh, go into this election campaign for 2022. There's just so much disinformation, um, and our citizens and our voters clearly are being affected by that disinformation. So it was important to put together in a non-partisan manner a group of advocates, we're lawyers, academics, students, activists, media organizations, advocacy organizations. We decided to band together to address this. It's really a cancerous problem, that can destroy our democracy. So that's really the reason why we got together, and it's not just for the elections, but the elections is a priority because it's top of mind in the next 6 months. Maybe Rico can add a few
Yeah,
things.
sure. Sure. Thank you, Dean. We are trying to address the separately in this particular letter. What would like we would like to know from the social media practitioners exactly what would be their policy towards the dissemination of information to the public, particularly during this upcoming Philippine national elections. Of course, we go beyond this election period, but we would like to know what are their content moderation initiatives for this particular purpose. We are now on the cusp of national elections, and therefore we should know exactly what they have in mind. In fact, we introduced and we requested in our Facebook letter that we sent it recently during the launching of our MAD. We sent them a 6-item uh, requests, and these are all incorporated in our Facebook letter that we launched recently.
So you launched on November 17 with that open letter to Facebook, and
Yes.
you asked for, among other things, transparency on election-related policies, flagging of imposter pages, monitoring of violations from authentic accounts, boosting of authoritative news. Do you think all of this can be achieved by May 2022?
Well, Dean, if I may, Dean will probably elaborate on that. We have not, Dean, we have not received any response from Facebook right now,
Mm,
right, Dean? So we're still waiting for the response of Facebook on our 6-point request. And it's a little bit premature now to find out
mm,
and make some conclusions about their responses. But in any effect, we're also planning to send some other media platforms like YouTube and the
mhm,
others, which are very actively involved in dissemination of information in relation to the election campaign.
mm. Um,
Uh,
you mentioned that they haven't. Oh, you
I
you
was going to
mentioned that
respond.
they haven't. Oh yes, Tony, go ahead.
Yes, I was going to respond, Vernice, to the question. The demands are all, they can all be met within the time frame of this election campaign.
Mm.
Uh, Facebook has acknowledged the letter, but they have not yet responded specifically on the things that we are asking for. So we will hold them to that, and we think we will get a response soon. Uh, I think with respect to the one strategy with this, as Nico's pointed out, is to deal with the social media platforms. And I think all of that can be done within the time frame of the elections. It's just about either amending their policies or, in fact, implementing their current policies already around disinformation more vigorously. There are things though like legislation that has to wait until uh, after the elections. You probably can get it done. There's very
Mm.
limited number of days of congressional activity after January, after the budget is approved. So, um, but many things can be done within the time frame that you ask whether they can be done during the time before the May
Mm.
22 elections.
Um, you mentioned during the launch that Facebook they've been doing things since 2016, right? Since the 2016 elections. The things on your list in your open letter, why do you think they haven't done those things yet? Could they have been stricter?
Yeah, definitely. They should have been more strict in respect of dissemination of misinformation, or those that are deemed to be misinformation and disinformation and fake news. That's
Mm.
why we found it imperative that we ask them specific steps that we propose they do on a self-regulatory basis. No? But
Mm.
otherwise, perhaps we can be more aggressive in terms of trying to do this and
Mm.
trying to address this more in a legal way. That's why we are coming up with a legal design for how we can address this legally. More
Mm.
particularly, with respect to aggressively trying to put some platforms on the spot by way of finding out. One very effective tool that we can probably have would be resort to the rule on rate of habeas data. This is a
Mm.
very important and potent procedure and tool that we can employ for this particular purpose of disinformation, misinformation, and fake news. And this is very summary in nature, and we can put the people that we are targeting as being the main sources of misinformation and disinformation. We can target them by way of rate of habeas data under
Mm.
AM number 08-1-16 SC, which the Supreme Court formulated as early as January 22, 2008. So this is one of the
Mm.
potent tools that we can now aggressively use against the people or the units or the entities uh, giving this misinformation and disinformation and fake news on the social
Mm.
media.
Um, so a large part of your movement is composed of lawyers, and you talk a lot about legislation, but the common sentiment among journalists, among fact checkers, is that they don't really want government involvement in legislation against disinformation. Could you talk us through what else you have in mind, and how it might be different from criminalizing libel?
Yes. In our discussion also, we're very clear that we are for free speech and for
Mm.
freedom of the press. Attorney Rico actually teaches that in Ateneo Law School. Uh, I teach that in several law schools as well, and so we're
Mm.
definitely free speech advocates and free press advocates. So we certainly don't want to go after sort of retail uh, statements by persons, by individuals. But our focus is on liability of the big social media platforms. And we don't even have to, develop new norms for that. Many of them or most of them have good community policies already. What we want
Mm.
to make sure is that there are enforcement means legally, maybe civilly, not criminally, that could be used if they in fact do not implement their community norms on disinformation and on hate speech properly. Because the thing is, it causes immense harm in our society.
Mm. There have been, however, attempts also to legislate against disinformation. What do you think was missing in those attempts?
Well,
We
as I
believe
said, I
that.
mean, I think it's directed at the individual more
Okay.
than the and actually misses the point by not focusing on the social media platforms and the liability of social media platforms. I think focusing on, let's say, the traditional press or on individuals is not the right way to go, because that in fact can suppress press freedom and free speech. But focusing on the social media platforms, that's not about expression or free speech. Sorry, it's a lot about profit. It's a lot about
Mm,
taking the precautions when you actually have the resource, and you can actually take the precautions because you have the resources. You're making so much money.
mm,
So what's insidious about this is when disinformation serves the social media company in terms of its pursuit of profit, right? So that's the one
yeah.
we want to target,
Okay.
not the ability of people to speak out or to express themselves.
Okay. Enrico, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on what Dean Tony said.
Mm-hmm.
What we are targeting would be not the small fries. No? We'd like to target. We go for the jugular. No? We go for the
Mm,
platforms. Now, to the extent that they are abetting or allowing with impunity the dissemination of disinformation and misinformation or fake news, then we hold them accountability or accountable for that.
mm,
And we have very, very powerful tool in the what I just mentioned, the Writ of Habeas data, more other procedural mechanisms that we can use, so that would actually uh, uh, we can use that as a deterrence for these media platforms. No?
mm,
So that they will address this more effectively and perhaps timely and almost instantaneously, particularly in these forthcoming elections, because you know this misinformation, disinformation, they go around fast. No, they are disseminated very
mm,
very fast, and sometimes they get away with it. That's why we want the
mm,
social media platforms, the key ones, the big ones, to self-regulate themselves, come up with some mechanism for immediate and effective uh, policies towards trying to abet or trying to deter that kind of
mm,
dissemination of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news.
Yeah.
mm,
That's exactly what we want. A deterrence factor. Kasi ngayon what we're doing now is these people are doing it with impunity. That's why we want to go to the big SOCMED platforms and say, what are you doing right now? And we want
mm,
to know exactly what you have or you're offering to the public so that we can address this pernicious uh, dissemination of misinformation and
mm,
Yes.
disinformation.
The people are sitting ducks against this information. We need to attack this in various ways. So, for example, many are already doing it through fact checking. So even Rappler
mm,
is doing that. Vera Files is doing that. There's several fact finding organizations that are already doing that. We need to engage them politically. So, for example, today we issued a statement about Maria Ressa being prohibited to go to Oslo, because we think that is about disinformation as well. The disinformation about her, the disinformation about Rappler. We've said that the targets of disinformation, for example, have been many of them have been women. So VP Lenny is the number one
mm,
target. Senator Laila De Lima, Representative Sara Elago, the Luma teachers. You see that Senator Risa Ontiveros. You will see the disinformation around women leaders, and we need to address that at the different levels, and make the platforms also accountable for that, because those are not really acceptable, and so you have to do it in all the ways that you can, because as I said, it also coming to us, the disinformation is coming to us from also different fronts.
Mm. Aside from attacks on women, what are you expect or attacks on specific groups? What are you expecting this coming 2022? I mean, I'm already seeing a lot of disinformation about the elections going around. Are you foreseeing any certain topics, anything that might affect our electoral process?
Well, let's start with that. The first is disinformation about the family of a candidate, and about
Mm,
Philippine history. We're seeing that in a massive way, and we need to correct that. That's important. The second is disinformation about candidates, both positive information about a candidate, claiming certain things, as well as negative propaganda against
mm,
candidates, claiming a candidate is this or that, even if that's not true. That needs to be countered in a non-partisan way also. The problem is if it's the candidate that tries to answer that, there is some kind of suspicion that, well, it's self-interested. So I think a non-partisan group should be able to answer that, whether we like the candidate or not. I mean, there is information is not limited to one or two candidates, or not limited to presidential candidates. Three, we need to watch out for disinformation as the campaign unfolds. For example, has a person withdrawn? Has a person endorsed someone else? Has the president done this or that? I mean, that's something to watch out for, especially at the end of the campaign, where some rumor will come up. Very, you know designed, intention, with the intention to actually deceive the public about a development in the campaign, in someone's campaign, even if it's not true. So there's the things you watch out for, the things that we expect social media companies to actually stop right at the beginning, right? When these attacks against candidates, from the very beginning, they should try to stop that already, if not at least before the harm becomes irreversible. Some have become irreversible, like, for example, historical revisionism. That's very hard to
mm,
reverse once it sets root into the minds of our people.
mm. I wanted to go back to what Rico was talking about, the writ of habeas data. You said it has been around since 2008. So I'd like to know why we haven't been using it, or have we been using it at all?
Well, perhaps I should not be the person who should be asked that because
Mm,
in my research, because I teach media law and ethics, no, and one of the things I
mm,
teach would be this: there was no occasion for me personally to really more aggressively look at the powerful this powerful tool to be able to
mm,
arrest and detect misinformation and fake news. No, and in the course of my teaching, I came across this as early as 2008. No, now that I am with Dean Tony, and we are now crafting our legal strategy. Soon enough, we will unfold that. I'm just trying to finish everything, and I'm trying to liaise with my counterparts in the New York State Bar Association. As you know, we have an
mm,
MOU. The Philippine Bar Association has an MOU, memorandum of agreement with the New York State Bar Association. We're trying to come up with a more comprehensive plan to address this misinformation. In fact, we are liaising with the New York State Bar as well in respect of the Facebook or Meta issue. As you
mm,
know, last October was a very thorough and very high-profile investigation of
mm,
the activities of Facebook or Meta. So we're trying to weave that into the international situation and trying to come up with another supplementary or more amplificatory campaign that we have here locally, particularly in the context of our electoral exercise in 2022. And this one is a very summary, Bernice. No, it's a very summary, and
Mm,
I think it's a very powerful tool for us to really tell these social media platforms that we mean business in trying to thread out this misinformation and disinformation and fake news materials on the social
mm,
media as well as in the regular media. So the this rule on the Writ of Habeas data would outline exactly, and it is very easy. In fact, we're going to come up with a template for this so that when we detect any activity on the social media, particularly in the platforms that would require us to use this particular tool, meaning the Writ of Habeas data, then we will use it. But of
mm,
course, as mentioned by Dean Tony, we will not look at it from a retail basis. We will look at the main players who are responsible and would be the sources of this misinformation, disinformation, and fake news.
mm. Okay, thank you. You both have mentioned other platforms, like, I mean, not just Facebook. I know we've been talking a
YouTube.
lot about Facebook, but yes, YouTube, you said you want to, you have demands of them as well. Could you expound more on what you're going to be asking of them? Or if there are other platforms that you're looking at, like maybe TikTok?
Rico, would you
Dean?
like to answer that? Rico is the one that
Yeah, we have about
worked on it.
two. Dean, I saw two versions of two Facebook like letters that would somehow generally address the matters that we had addressed in the Facebook letter, and we're going to send it to the other major platforms. We're just having it processed within our organization, and we hope to release them through Attorney Grace Salonga,
Mm,
one of our conveners. No? So just so watch out for them. And the only thing, as
mm,
mentioned by Dean Tony, we released about the matter on the request of your founder, Maria Ressa, for
mm,
permission to go to Oslo, Norway, this December 10th. After that, we will immediately release some other letters, copies of the letters that we have addressed to the other SOCMED media platforms. We
mm.
will give you a copy of that as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Bernice, the demand is essentially modification of their policies to make it stronger against um, disinformation, and also to implement current policies more strictly, and with the ability to engage stakeholders like us. So if we have complaints, they can immediately answer those.
Mm. And we've been talking in the context of the 2022 elections. If these demands are not met by 2022, what can we do as a public to protect our own election?
Well, I think the important thing is to keep on keeping vigilance, taking action. We will not rule out, and Enrico might want to explain that, legal action if necessary. But
Um, Maybe Rico, you can explain about legal
Yeah,
action.
because Dean Tony's voice is fading out. Yeah, let me just
Yeah.
amplify that by saying that we will be, as mentioned by Dean Tony, our chair, we will be very, very vigilant, even beyond the electoral campaign
Mm,
period. We will address this. This is not a short-lived movement. We will do this on
mm,
a continuing basis, and we will resort to all legal means. Of course, we will also be able perhaps to introduce or to propose some remedial legislation. But I think the more important thing right now is to implement what we have in existing statutes as well as in procedures. So that's something that we can do on a long-term basis as well. But what I can say, Bernice, one important thing, no, we are not very critical of the overall. We're not very critical of the SOCMED media platforms. For example, in our Facebook letter, we uploaded the removal of the newsworthiness presumption previously enjoyed by political figures by Facebook. And we want that effectively
Mm,
implemented as well, no? Because there used to be a presumption of newsworthiness before. Right now, that presumption has been deleted, has been abandoned. So we can now put the media platforms on the spot right now. The burden is for them to put to fruition that deletion of that presumption of newsworthiness. No? So that's something that we would like to
mm.
be vigilant about, particularly now that we are facing national elections.
Okay. This is my last question for today. There's for us at least at Rappler, because we have fact checking webinars and this information is really a huge advocacy for us. I've noticed really an increased interest in fact checking and disinformation, especially among the youth. So if there's anyone here who want to know how they can help, how can we support the movement against disinformation, and how can we fight disinformation in our own communities?
Thank you. That's a very good question, Bernice, because we have a strong youth and student component in MAD, in the movement against disincrimination. We have student leaders from Ateneo de Manila and from other schools, and we want to recruit
Mm,
even more youth as fact checkers, as something to assert the truth. See, it's not just fact checkers we actually need a counter initiative against disinformation. If there's disinformation, we also if there's disinformation trolls, we need truth squads, and the
mm,
youth is really good for that because they are passionate and they are committed and they have the tools to be able to do that.
mm. And Rico, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'd like to just stress the point that whilst Facebook had been made or thought to be responsible for the election of some people in 2016 using,
Mm,
not deliberately, but using their platform. Now, I think it's about time that Facebook would like to resurrect itself as one that would help us in responsible elections. So it will be incumbent, as I mentioned earlier, for these social media platforms to assist us, particularly the civic society, in trying to have a clean and credible and fair and peaceful election this 2022. These are very, very important. We are, if I may use the cliche, this is actually
mm.
we are at the inflection point of our national history, and therefore we should do something about effecting a clean, honest, and peaceful election this 2022, and let the sovereign will of the people prevail, and not because people who would like to disseminate misinformation and disinformation and fake news would prevail. Let the real, authentic will of the sovereign people come out and prevail.
Okay, thank you so much, Rico and Tony, for speaking with me today. That's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us. And to those watching, thank you as well for joining us. Again, I'm Vernice Tantuco, and this was Rappler Talk.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Vern.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Rico.